All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. This is our fifth and final Rulemaking Advisory Committee meeting for the Division 83 rulemaking. So thanks everyone for joining, especially on a Friday. Now, we don't typically meet on Fridays, but this date seemed to work for most of you as our final meeting, so appreciate the time. I'll go over our agenda and then we can dive in for today. And I should say that we're not going to have a lot of presentation. Today is really about hearing RAC member feedback, so you won't see a lot of slides or anything from us today. But just as a reminder, kind of where we've been and where we are today, at the last few RAC meetings, RAC members have provided lots of great comments and discussion on portions of the Division 83 rules. At the last meeting, you saw some kind of preliminary changes to the rules, but not too many yet. And since then, DSL has really done a lot of red lines to the rules and coordinated with other state agencies and internally to kind of create more proposed changes to the rules. And so you got a red line version of the rules in the email, as well as kind of a short document that outlines some of the key proposed changes to the rules. So we hope you all got a chance to review those before today's meeting. And today we're really going to focus on kind of diving in piece by piece each section of the rules, kind of share those proposed changes and just hear your reflections. See, how does this sound to you? Do you think that the rules are striking the right balance in terms of needs for industry, community, and the state of Oregon? So we'll really just focus on what RAC members want to talk about. We'll take as much or as little of this 3 hour that we have set aside as we need to hear from all of you. And we will still have an opportunity for public comment towards the end of today's meeting. And also, Danielle, if you don't mind just putting the link to the rulemaking website, just in case folks want to follow along as we're going through the proposed, especially to the proposed rules in the summary of changes document. So again, we're not going to put any slides up right now, but maybe we'll do a quick round of intros before we kind of dive into the meat of today's meeting. So let's see. Let's go to RAC members first. Jason and then Cameron.
Good morning. This is Jason Bush. I'm the Executive Director of POET, Pacific Ocean Energy Trust.
Hello, Cameron Fisher with Environmental Science Associates. I'm the Director of Marine Infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks. Courtney and then Eric.
Morning, Courtney Lee. I cover the Northwest for the state and local policy team at AWS. I'm filling in for Sarah McComb.
Good morning, Eric Chambers, Central Lincoln PUD, representing community-owned utilities.
Let's go to Greg and then Jason.
Thanks. Greg Miller, lobbyist with League of Oregon Cities.
Well, you said Jason again. I've already introduced myself. Hello, everyone.
Oh, sorry. Did you? Okay.
Sorry.
Joan and then Kevin.
I'm assuming you mean me by Joan, Sylvia.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Joanne Morris of Google, and I'm a RAC committee member.
I'm Kevin Raniger with Band and Power.
All right, Lene and then Scott McMullen.
Hi, Lene Rutledge representing rural coastal communities. I live in Tierra Del Mar.
Hi, Scott McMullen, Oregon Fishermen's Cable Committee.
Thanks, Scott. Did I miss any RAC members before I go to technical advisors? All right. Then let's go to our, oh, did I? No. Let's go to our technical advisors. Let's go to Laurel and then Scott and then Andy.
Good morning, Laurel Hellman, Oregon Parks and Recreation Department.
Hello, Scott Marion with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Marine Program.
Good morning, Andy Lanier, Marine Affairs Coordinator with the Department of Land Conservation and Development.
Great. And then let's go to DSL, Natalia, Danielle, and then Blake.
Morning, everyone. Natalia, Astronautical Territorial Specialist.
Good morning, Danielle Boudreau, Rulemaking Coordinator for DSL. Good morning, folks. Blake Helm, the proprietary specialist for the department.
Awesome. All right, did I miss anyone? Okay, then let's dive in. Before we screen share the rules, I'll hand it to Natalia for just a brief reminder of how DSL is considering RAC comments and coordinating with other agencies, and then we'll pull up the May red line version of the rules. So Natalia, over to you.
Thanks, Sylvia. So basically, the version that you see now, we try to address in the time that we had 2 weeks. Main issue, key component, and recommendation, let's say. We consulted with our sister agency, state agency, and technical advisors. And those comments and red line that you see, those main key issue that we try to address for now. We are still continue doing things, but that more simple, let's say. We want to hear as much as possible today your feedback about those key components, any recommendation, any perspectives you have. After that, we will prepare a draft. Then we will send the draft to state agency, again, for the comments, but also Department of Justice. So the version before the public comments period that will be published on the website, they may be slightly edited, depends what comment will have state agency and also Department of Justice. Yeah, this is the brief one. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Natalia. Any questions about that process from folks? Okay, then let's dive in. Danielle, do you want to pull up the red line of the rules? So what we'll do is we'll just start at the top and go through each portion of the rules. I'll just do a quick reminder of what changed in each portion based on kind of the summary of proposed changes. And we really want to hear from you. Do you feel like these proposed changes incorporate RAC input and strike a good balance? Again, there have been different kinds of comments, right? Sometimes competing points of view. So of course, DSL is trying to balance all of that while meeting the needs of the state. But so kind of want to hear from you. Do you feel like a good balance is shown here? And if not, are there other changes you would propose? Are there any other comments or ideas you have for a path forward that really meets multiple interests? So with that, we'll just kind of start at the top here. So with the purpose and applicability, the key change that was made here was to try to clarify that the rules do not apply to other renewable energy facilities, based on some comments from RAC members that it wasn't quite clear enough. The rules here do not apply to the kinds of things that are covered under other OARs that do cover renewable energy facilities. So I'll pause there, see if there are any questions and thoughts or suggestions. Scott, over to you.
Thank you. Getting the phone call here at the wrong time. I just wanted to clarify, and I remember I was involved with TSC, Territory C Plan Part 5, and I wanted to make sure we understood clearly in everybody's mind whether this applies to the export cable coming from the renewable energy facility to the shore. Is the cable covered under TSP Part 4 or is it under 5? Thanks. And I'll mute.
You can see over here to the side where I have this RAC 5 comment, where hopefully all the renewable ocean energy devices and renewable energy are covered under divisions 125 and 140. So 140 is where that territorial sea part 5 would come in. And so just to make it even more clear, because there's been a lot of questions about the transmission lines, is I put over here to the side a possible more wording here so that it's authorizations for ocean energy conversion devices, the renewable energy facilities and transmission lines, just to try to make that clear. So hopefully that does. I don't know, Scott McMullen, if that works for you.
Yeah, that's clear. It's just that it's a change from what it was previously. I can remember, and I think Andy Lanier can back this up, but for years, the discussion had always been the cables would come under TSP Part 4. So just so it's clear and there's no ambiguity. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can add, and Andy can correct me. Yes, it is in Territorial Sea Plan. We have Part 4 for cables, basically now for undersea infrastructure, and we have Part 5 for renewable energy facility. And yes, it is Part 5 mentioned that if there is a cable coming up from renewable energy facility, the only issue the JART, Joint Agency Review Team, should be gathering together, kind of like member from Part 4 and Part 5. So the JART could be combination of those representative different perspective. So this is what in the Territorial Sea Plan. But yes, in our rules, we have the separate Division 83, basically for Part 4, and Part 5, Division 140, that's required to gather JART. In the future, again, after the new amendment of the Territorial Sea Plan, Part 1, 2, 4, and 5, that DLCD is planning in the next 5 years, we will need to revise our rules and see how should we align all of those things.
Okay. Thanks, Natalia. And Scott, Marion, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a voice to that need for clarity there. I think what Danielle outlined of explicitly talking about the transmission lines is really critical here to clear this up because of that sort of historical change and ambiguity there. It's really important to specify that the transmission lines are intended to be included.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, and so maybe others, does that sound okay to explicitly include transmission lines within the rule language here so that it's extra clear? Would anyone have concerns with that change?
Would that, in a general sense, include outfall? I don't know if line would be a generic enough term that it would impact city outfall.
I'll turn to Danielle, but I think the intent here is to focus on the ocean energy.
Yeah. So outfalls in the territorial sea are now covered under 123. And what we're hoping to do here is to move outfalls for the territorial sea, only outfalls for the territorial sea, into this this division of rules. And so this wouldn't cover, like, 3B wouldn't cover outfalls. 3D is what is covering outfalls. And when we get to the outfall language, we can talk more about that. But yeah, so this is 3B is only renewable ocean energy.
And Scott, do you still have your hand up from before, or did you have another thought here?
If that's me, yeah, sorry, I left that up.
Okay, no worries.
While I'm on, it does strike me that cables is a more technically appropriate word than lines in that case, but I guess you could think of it either way. But it seems much of the other language is talking about cables. It might be best to retain that language.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to clarify, in Division 140, there is a definition of what considering ocean renewable energy facility, and there is explicitly saying that it's cable, transmission lines, buoys, and etc. So yeah, that's why we refer. You cannot put everything. And again, this is the from our past conversation with DRG. DOJ that you cannot like put everything explicitly in the rule because there is other rules and we just refer and there is a definition for renewable energy facility and rules for that specific part that we try to regulate.
Thanks, Natalia. Laurel?
I'm basically reiterating what Scott said. It's when we were doing part 5, we weren't considering that. I mean, as far as I can recall, we weren't considering that cables were part of what that would apply to. So Scott already said that this would be a change, but I don't know. I know I haven't gone through and looked at what that would, all the different things that that might mean. I just know that when we were doing part 5, cables were always considered to be part of a different section of the territorial sea plan. So.
Okay. So Laurel, does that change what should be in here?
I don't know. I haven't looked at it with that lens. That would be a question for Andy and Scott and everybody. I know when we were doing that, it was cables will be covered by part 4, and unless I'm misremembering. So I don't think so because of what Scott said. So I don't know what implications that would have, if any. I just know that that's not my memory of that process.
Okay.
I will just chime in to say that is also my recollection of the process.
I guess I could just offer, within ODFW, working with Delia Kelly, the ocean energy coordinator there. Originally, she was quite invested in this Division 83 process under the understanding that essentially her projects, the ocean energy projects, would be dependent on these rules because of the treatment of the cables. And then in previous meetings, when we clarified that the intent was to not include renewable energy cables in Division 83, that was sort of a change in her understanding of how this would relate to the development of energy projects. So just sort of agreeing from our perspective, this is a sort of a change in either jurisdiction or treatment under the different components.
Just to clarify, and Blake can correct me, I don't see the change there because in terms of, yes, part 5 mentioned that cable need to be treated under part 4 and JARD need to be gathered concurrent with part 4 and 5. So it's like the same JARD, but with a representative from different, let's say, industry. So that's related to JARD, but also our Division 140 mention JARD under part 5. So basically, currently, again, ideally, we need to amend all our current division to be aligned with everything. But we consider that the territorial sea plan, part 4 and 5 will be amended again, and part 1 and 2 in the next 1.5 year. So it makes sense to wait to see how the alignment it should be, but it doesn't eliminate JARD. So we are still gathering under current rule. If it's a renewable energy facility that would be regulated under Division 140, we still gather JARD under Part 5, but we also invite whatever representative covering Part 4 as well. So we gather JARD, and we discuss the same cables and renewable energy facility, but it just, in our case, regulated by Division 140, and it didn't change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I know that, and welcome, Jill, thanks for joining. And I see a couple more hands up on this topic. I think it sounds like there might be some offline, checking that's needed to make sure all of these rules are squaring together and that everything is aligned. But let's go to Eric and then Blake, and maybe some offline work is needed to make sure that this section is correct. And then I do want to make sure we have time to get to the rest of the rules today too. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be brief. And this is one of the only areas that I've sort of had a hyper focus on. So I did ask Sylvia some clarifying questions over the last week on it. I wasn't part of a previous rulemaking on this, so I'm coming in cold just into this rulemaking. But one thing that I think is useful is if the question is narrowly on like whether or not transmission it should be overtly included here, or if that changes anything, that the definition, so under OAR 141.140 that governs renewable energy facilities, it defines the facilities consistent with statute to mean energy conversion technology or device that is used as a necessary component of a research project, demonstration project, or commercial operation to generate ocean renewable energy, including but not limited to all buoys, anchors, energy collectors, cables, controls, and transmission lines, and other equipment necessary or useful for the project operation. So I don't think adding transmission here hurts anything, since that's already defined when you go into the OAR that it's exempting. Our interest here is just making sure that things don't get double counted under separate rules. So we would definitely be in favor of being as clear as possible about what's not included.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Eric. And Blake?
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. I was just going to provide some, what I think is some clarification that, the OAR, 141083, what we're talking about today, is not the same as the Territorial Sea Plan. So these rules are trying to implement the Territorial Sea Plan. And so including, the clarification of conversion devices, renewable energy facilities, and, cables would not exclude those cables from having a JART under a different process, like under Division 140. So I don't see this as changing the Territorial Sea Plan. We're just trying to clarify on our rules how we authorize it, whether it's under this division or another division. That is not mutually exclusive of the requirements in the Territorial Sea Plan. So I think there might be some conflating here that these rules are the Territorial Sea Plan, but perhaps not. But the way that we see it is that this is clarifying how we authorize it and not changing what's required on the Territorial Sea Plan.
Thanks, Blake. All right. Well, I'm going to move us along to this next piece here. Subsection D, there was a change here, and it's essentially, this change is, well, maybe I'll hand it to Natalia to explain this one a little bit more, and then we'll move into the new rule sections. Or Danielle?
I can do it.
Sorry. Okay.
This one was is what we're doing to move outfalls under. So it was, we wanted to capture existing easements, not just in like specify the existing easements in the territorial sea that were granted under these rules and under 123 before the adoption of these rules as they are now. So this is just that capturing again of outfalls from 123 into here, and anything else that may have been granted in the territorial sea under 123 previously. And things in 123 may have been granted. I think, Natalia, you said sometimes outfalls had like a 50-year easement agreement. So these are things that would have been captured in 123 well before these this division was adopted.
Yeah, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a hand raise button. Sorry about that. I did get quite a bit of feedback from coastal cities over the last month on the impact here. Some cities that had outfall in rivers and bays that were considering the territorial sea that are now not considering the territorial sea because of the cost, the differences there. Also, special districts had indicated some significant concern. Twin Rocks Sanitary Sewer District, I think, was one specifically. But the impact here would be prohibitive to redo a sewer outfall, essentially. The way that that cost is amortized over the residents of that district or the city would be just a kind of unsustainable cost there. So I just wanted to throw that out real quick.
Thank you. And I will address the cost later too, because I have to talk about the formula. Yeah.
Yeah, great. We'll get to that section of the rules in a little bit. All right, well, I'll keep moving into the next section of the rules, which is definitions. And again, maybe general provisions. There weren't any major changes. I think a few things were removed for clarity. But I'll just keep going to the definition section. There was one or a couple of changes here in 1820. Oh, sorry.
We didn't have change in definition. No, it's the next
sorry.
one.
Okay, the next one. All right.
I think, yeah, that's about operating agreements that we added. Let's see. Yeah.
Yes. So then if we go to the easement application requirements, this one 4C kind of limits the information that applicants must provide. I know there were some comments from RAC members that there should be limitations on what's required just to make it really clear what the applicant needs to provide. And there's also clarification that the resource and use inventory and effects evaluation report is required. And then later that's actually spelled out in more detail. But I'll pause here, see if there's any thoughts on portion C here. And then also letter E was updated to make it clear that operating agreement means an operating agreement for a limited liability company or a trust. There were some questions too about what does that actually mean? It could be very broad.
And just to clarify, as Sylvia mentioned, we added separate section, separate rule for resource and use inventory and effect evaluation based on the comment that it should be more clear. But that section, basically, this is a short version what we have in the part 4 of the territorial C plan that require that resource inventory. So from DSL part, we didn't add anything new for resource inventory. We just clarify based on our internal discussion with another agency and your feedback and comments that we want to have more clear information what it should be. So we just added separate section for that.
Okay. Well, any comments, questions here? All right, well, let's keep going then. Yeah, and so this one, 0831, this is the new section that Natalia was talking about. This outlines what's included, what needs to be included in that resource and use inventory and effects evaluation, kind of basically verbatim from TSP, right, Natalia? Like none of these words are new. That's all just sort of put into the rules for clarity.
There is even like more requirements. I mean, I just try to summarize what the main information should be. But of course, when we will review application, in particular, we will have pre-application chart meeting. Certainly, we will go through the requirements in the territorial C plan part 4. Yeah, but this is just to give an idea of what it should be. And this is not new information because even if it's telecommunication cable, it's coming from the federal water, and all this information usually also submitted to the federal government and need to go through the federal consistency review. Basically, it's just information that the company can use and submit to DSL.
Thanks. Scott, you have a comment?
I do. In this area, we have things like, well, it just seems like there's a lot of things that really probably are not particularly necessary for a cable installation. And I just I guess it's fine to have it in there in case you have sort of a novel use that's different and you want to be able to check, but it just seemed like there was a lot of things that's for a very temporal impact of a cable plow going through to lay a cable. Um, it's like I think I've said this before. It's like digging for a razor clam on the beach. You dig a clam and the sand just immediately fills back in one or two waves, and you can't even tell where you dug the clam. So I guess maybe it doesn't need a change, but I hope that DSL in the review and in the requirements that they discuss at the JART make it clear of the things that really are necessary and the things that for sort of a routine cable installation aren't necessary. They don't have to be gone into a lot of detail because it does take time and it does take cost to provide details for a lot of things that are really just a very momentary impact. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. And Natalia, did you have thoughts on that?
Just feedback. Thank you so much, Scott. Yes, telecommunication fiber optical cables are different than could be like for power cables. But yes, the part 4 now covering all undersea infrastructure, and this is resource use and inventory for all undersea infrastructure requirements. And part 4 does have the sentence that DSL may waive a resource inventory. So some information could be waived. We decide case by case. We will see what type of project, what a complexity of that project. Yes, and certainly for telecommunication cable, it will be different a little bit requirements and information than for power cable or other undersea infrastructure. And we have in our rules as well that unless DSL waive that information. Thanks.
Thanks, Natalia. All right, well, any other comments here? All right, let's just keep going then to section 0840 is the next place where comments or where changes were made. There were no changes to just stop right there first to 0835. And this is the requirement for the JART pre-application meeting, but there weren't any comments from RAC members on this one in past meetings. But yeah, Scott, did you have something? And I think you're on mute if you are speaking. Can't tell.
Sorry. It's on the bottom of page 8 under subpart A, biological and ecological effects. And again, this sort of relates to what I spoke and Natalia spoke to as well. But it asks for evaluation of possible outcomes. This is under A, capital A. It says the evaluation shall discuss possible outcomes that are either likely to occur or catastrophic environmental effects of low probability. And it just seems like that is such a wide open thing. It seems sort of overkill to try to imagine all of the catastrophic things that could possibly happen, although they're so extremely unlikely to happen that why should the applicant have to go through all these weird outlier potentials? It just seems sort of bizarre. Thanks.
Yeah, Natalia?
Yeah, just to clarify one more time, we didn't add anything new. This is how it sounds in the territorial sea plan part 4. But that's why we have JART pre-application meeting, because state agency and other stakeholders that would be there, and when the potential applicants present the project and whatever they have at that time for pre-application meeting, JART will help to decide and guide what should be included and what information are required based on connection and coordination with other permits from other state agency. And that's why we have this section and paragraph that after the JART meeting, we will prepare, based on those discussions, DSL will prepare recommendation and next step, what information should be included in the actual application to DSL. Yeah, but this is how it sounds in part 4 of the territorial C, and we didn't add anything else. But JART will help us to decide and make some recommendation, what is necessary, what is not, based on the individual projects. Yeah, I hope I answered that.
Thanks, Natalia. Thanks, Scott. All right, so let's keep moving to 140. So there were some changes here. I think number 1 was just clarification that the department will determine whether an application is complete as identified above. So just kind of referencing what it means to be complete. And then in part 3 here, there was a comment from RAC members in past meetings about the 120-day requirement here. Or sorry, this was about administratively closing the application rather than denying it. I think at a past meeting, somebody noted that if you deny the application, then that closes it completely and you can have an appeal, but instead the department would close the application. So that was in response to RAC comments, and I'll just go through the last 2 changes here and then we'll open it up. The letter 3A here is meant to give an extension of time to applicants to provide information beyond the 120 days in the rules. You know, this was sort of allow an exception for someone that's acting in good faith and trying to get the information. So it's kind of in response to that comment. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions, comments, if these rules kind of meet what you were expecting. Jill, go ahead.
Instead of saying administratively close, I would say if a revision of an application is not resubmitted within the 120 days of the incomplete determination, the application will be void. That way you're not doing an action at all. It just becomes void.
I will say one thing. I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but the administratively close is consistent with other rules and other applications that we have. So I think that's where we were going with it. But yeah, I will if you could repeat what you were saying about void.
So it's just in the land use rules, it says if they fail to submit the information, the application becomes void. And so you're not actually taking any type of action. The application becomes void. And then you can say afterwards, the department will administratively close the application or something like that. But I just am worried that I'm just worried that somebody's going to come back and argue that you made a mistake by closing it rather than just saying that it's automatically void.
All right, thanks, Jill. So it sounds like DSL might just need to check internally if that's consistent with the processes. But yeah, I think that the comments there. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments here? All right. Then let's keep going. So number 5, yes. 5 here on public information meetings. There were comments in past RAC meetings with concerns about holding public information meetings too early. And so this language was updated to provide just a little bit more flexibility to say that public information meetings may be held as part of the review process, kind of just depending on the situation. So I'll just pause there to see if that sounds okay. Okay, just keep moving then. We'll pause here. This new number 8. There were concerns at past RAC meetings about the department determining if technical experts are required, that this language was just a little bit too onerous and could put too much burden on applicants. So it was revised to say that the applicant and the department can kind of jointly, mutually select a third-party expert at the cost of the applicant if it's deemed that the services of a technical expert are required. So a little bit more of a mutual process rather than a dictated one. And Scott, I see your thumbs up. Thanks for that. Others, and folks from industry too, if you feel like this language is working for you, is a better improved change, that's always helpful to hear too. So Scott, I appreciate that. Joanne, thanks. See your thumbs up too. All right, well, I'll keep moving then. I don't know if there are any other major changes there. Oh, actually move up just a little bit. Number 10, or the new, I guess it's the new number 9, was modified. So previously this language said that after receiving comment, the department will determine whether additional information is needed. And that was now changed so that it's not about determining if additional information is needed, but it's only about determining if there are any modifications needed for the project. So again, removing some of that uncertainty for industry and having to provide additional information continuously. Okay, and thanks. I see a thumbs up from Scott. Appreciate that. Courtney, do you have a comment?
I did have a comment. I'm curious, I think Amazon advocated for a timeline here, so to avoid unnecessary churn. I think we offered maybe 60 days. I'm curious if that's still an option to add a timeline in here.
I'll turn it to DSL for that question.
Daniela or me, whatever who is. Okay, she's tapping. So time. Oh yeah, Blake. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Happy to respond. So our proprietary processes don't typically contain or don't contain at all timelines for us reviewing applications. It's seen as a different extension of our authority. This is we're not using regulatory authority, so there's not the statutory constraint to provide a response in a set timeline. That said, we typically try to respond in 30 or 60 days for most of the things that we have to review. Our big issue with providing a timeline here is that we may be forced to approve or otherwise make a decision that we feel like we haven't been able to have the time to review and discuss, especially in the territorial sea, which is a very special resource that once used can never be spent again. So we're pretty protective of our proprietary process as a land manager who is issuing authorizations for public land. We want to make sure that we're making the right decisions and that we're not constrained by arbitrary timelines.
I get that. Are you anticipating a lot of applications coming your way to where the process would be pushed out 60, 120 days?
I mean, I believe We have received one territorial sea cable application in the last 2 years, or maybe it's been three, as long as three. I believe the Amazon cable was our last cable. We're not anticipating a lot of applications for these cables in the near future. That may change with the industry, but we haven't seen indications that we'd see an influx. Obviously, renewable energy sectors may pop up in the continental shelf for wind and other places for wave devices, but right now that's a very tentative industry, and especially here in Oregon. So we're not seeing a long line of applicants asking us questions about uses, especially for cables and energy devices.
Okay. Well, we're going to continue to advocate for a timeline to be added here. I mean, I definitely understand, the time needed to protect resources. I totally get that, not advocating against that at all, but it just provides the industry a timeline and some predictability versus if we submit something and you need more information, the clock kind of starts all over again. I've dealt with my fair share of Department of Environmental Quality permits, and that kind of is the same situation. And so I think timelines would be greatly appreciated in this instance.
Okay, thanks, Courtney. I appreciate that. And I saw lots of thumbs up for that. So we'll continue to note that in the comments. Scott, go ahead. Marianne, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I guess I'm a little unclear how the elimination of the additional information clause there is to anyone's benefit, in the sense that we've retained the clause that says the department will determine whether modifications are required. So I'm imagining an example where a comment comes in, and just say hypothetically, it's like a fisherman that says, this is right on the most valuable spot for my fishing location. There is habitat on the bottom there that would be disrupted by this project or would displace my fishing, whatever it might be. I could imagine that the next logical step would be ask the applicant, does your survey information support or reject the idea that there is some kind of special habitat there, or whatever it might be, and that's an ask that would help resolve that clarity, as opposed to being forced to go straight to saying a modification is needed or is not needed. So I'm a little, it seems like we've just constrained options there to say, well, either you have to modify the project or do nothing. So I'm a little concerned about that.
Thanks, Scott. And Natalia, I see your hand up. I don't know if it was in response to Scott's comment, but maybe if you want to address that too.
Yeah, I was going to just to reflect on the timeline. Yeah, so many things. My brain is just so with the timeline, as I already mentioned, yes, and we looked at the energy facility siting rule that you suggested. That's a little bit different. Requirements are different, and rules are different, and those related mostly siting on uplands. Territorial sea is a different one. And DAQ, yes, they may have some timelines as well. But I want to highlight, and we consult with this, and we consult again with the DOJ, that in the territorial sea, it's unique. It's different than uplands. And some factor involved. We have JART, we have State Land Board involved, we have DOJ sufficiency review, etc. So, and somehow we cannot control many external factors, or information may be required. That's why we are saying submit at least 180 days before. We try our best, depends again on the complexity of the project, to issue the easements during the 6 months. But it could be some situation that we may require maybe gathering additional JART during the application process review. Maybe we need to consult with the DOJ and other agency. We don't know the situation from the applicant side as well. So we are not, as Blake already mentioned, we don't want to restrict that and obligate it, and then having the DSL didn't issue the decision during that time, because so many factors should be considered here. And again, it's different from DAQ when they don't have state land board meeting. Again, state land board meeting gathering only 6 times per year, and so many other factors we have connected to the territorial sea plan. It's a little bit different. And again, this is case by case, individual, depends on how broad information will be submitted, how communication is going, and etc., and complexity of the project. So that's regarding the timeline. Regarding additional information, I think this particular paragraph, receiving comments, will determine modification. We are talking about receiving comments. In the early stage, I think before, we still have that paragraph, DSL may require additional information, including what feedback would be from JART. So that specific paragraph related to when we receive all comments and some additional information already submitted, we decide what next step should be, or if there is some modification needed. I hope that clarifies Scott Marion and Scott McMillan.
Okay. Yeah, I'll pause to see if RAC members or Scott Marion have anything else.
Well, I understand. I mean, I guess my understanding was that this phrase was struck in response to concern from industry that there would be sort of a loop of back and forth, and it would extend timelines or add unspecified additional requirements. But it just strikes me that this solution is a constraining one that might make it more complicated. In other words, if the department is unable to request an additional information in response to, for example, a public comment that came in that wasn't anticipated in the JART or by the agencies, that their only option is to ask the applicant to modify the project or perhaps reject the project, something like that, which is a larger obstacle, larger delay than it would be a request for information. So I'm not. It just doesn't feel to me like that solution of saying we won't ask for additional information, although it doesn't explicitly say that we won't ask for it. It just doesn't. It isn't listed as a possibility there. It doesn't seem like that has improved the process for anyone.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. We will double check with DOJ from legal perspective what is required, additional information, and what is modification, to make sure. Yeah, we cover everything. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, Daniela, you made comment. Yeah, there. Okay.
Great, thank you. And Scott McMillan?
Yeah, thank you. I just was going to remind Scott Marion, that in Oregon, the process for the past 25 years has been the fishermen are working together. I think cable owners coming to Oregon know they need to work with the fishing industry. It's enshrined in the territorial sea plans so that they communicate and work with the fishing industry. And because of that, cable owners don't even submit a route until after they've already worked with the fishermen and identified the good routes. So I think in this case, I understand, Scott, your point about wanting not to be confined and restricted. I think the point here is we should try to make it as easy as possible for permitting to take place, meeting all the requirements, getting all the information that's needed, but not have it drag out longer than necessary. I note that the state has joined the International Submarine Cable Protection Committee at 2,500 pounds per year. That sort of signals that the state of Oregon is interested in attracting cables. And if that's what we're doing here is trying to attract cables to our state, then one of the ways that that can be for that to be really effective is for the state to be known to have a fast process. Unnecessarily delays do not help make Oregon a good place to land cables. So Australia, I know at the last ICPC meeting, a speaker there talked about their process, 25 days for cables that are in a cable protection zone, and 60 days was the turnaround time, maximum of 60 days for cables in a outside a cable protection zone, the rest of the country. So I think the point here is just let's try to make it so that Oregon is still an attractive place to land cables. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And I see other hands here. Go ahead, Scott Marion.
Thanks. Just to reply, a couple quick points. Scott, I think my comments are directed at that same goal to make this process as quick and efficient as possible. And so the additional information piece of that seems to me like the least objectionable way to respond to a public comment. I guess I would pose the question: what's the point of asking for public comment if we don't have an ability to reply to get additional information in response to that, to quickly deal with issues that might come up during comments? It essentially constrains our options in response to comment. And the other is just, we learn on a daily basis here at ODFW that fishermen don't speak with a unified voice all the time. And so I appreciate your efforts to coordinate the voice of the trawl industry that's primarily affected, but we get all kinds of diverse input and folks who are not engaged in various stages of the process, and it's important to be able to get new information or a comment and deal with that as efficiently as possible. So that's why I'm sort of focused on that. Being able to ask for other information is useful in that regard to smooth the process for all involved.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, and so I know I'm hearing there's this need to balance the interests and making sure the process is not unduly lengthened for reasons that aren't helpful to anyone, but also making sure that DSL is able to ask for information to make sure that projects are beneficial to the state, to the environment. So maybe it's just worth another look by DSL to see if the rules provide you with enough opportunities to get the information that's required, be responsive to public comment, while also balancing kind of that easier process piece. And anything else on this one? Maybe this will result in additional revisions. DSL, I'm not really sure, but I think the comments are on the table to make sure this language is as good as possible.
Yeah, again, as I already mentioned, it may change based on the DOJ comments and review.
Thank you. All right, well, let's keep moving in the rules. Let's see. I think those were most of the changes in that section, and now we can go to 850, which is the easement terms and conditions. So here we talked about this at the last RAC meeting, but the term of the easement is now extended to 25 years to align with the average lifespan of a cable. That was a request by industry, so that change is here. It sounded like at the last meeting, folks were in favor of that change. I'll pause to see if there's any other comments on it. Thanks, Joanne, for the thumbs up. Scott McMullen.
Yeah, I have a comment on 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the idea is good here. We made an exception, but when cables come into an existing land, and you can have a cable owner that puts in a landing beach manhole. It's a vault that's designed maybe for multiple cables to come into. Um, it it seems like there shouldn't have to be one more hoop to jump through to ask for an exception. It just seems like this is sort of an unnecessary complication. Cable owners know very well the international standards for separation of cables, and they get them as separated as soon as possible. But when they converge at a single beach manhole, it doesn't it seems like an unnecessary hoop to jump through to ask for an exception. It just seems like that should be a standard. And I don't see real any benefit to this provision number 5. I think that's already handled. We don't have a problem with this. I understand that maybe it's in the state's interest to allow for cable repairs by separation, but the industry knows that very well, and they do their absolute best to provide that. So I just think this is an unnecessary delay in the process to have to ask for an exception.
So Scott, do you have a specific suggestion
Yes.
to revise this language?
I would just take 5 out. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it adds any value. The cables are going to be separated to industry standards, whether this is in or not. So it just seems like one extra uh, hoop to jump through.
Okay. I see a couple of thumbs up for that suggestion too, from Joanne and Elaine. Any other comments on that or different opinions on section 5? All right, then let's keep going.
Sylvia,
Scott Marion, go ahead.
I guess I'll just jump in with a different perspective
Okay.
or a different angle on the same answer. I also support the removal of the separation standard there, but for the reason that it seems like we have an interest in routing these in the best, most, least environmentally sensitive routings, and that the separation standards are constraints on what we might otherwise want to do, especially as we approach a bore pipe, or especially as we're getting in shallow water and trying to avoid rocky features. So I feel like that's appropriate to remove that.
Okay, thanks, Scott Marion. And DSL, any questions or comments on any of that?
No, I think that's
Okay. I didn't quite hear you, Blake.
no. I'm sorry. I was just saying that I think the comments and concerns are pretty clear, and we'll just look at how we can. I don't want to put words in Natalia's mouth, but I think the idea was that we make sure that the cables are adhering to the separation standards, and that was the main goal of this. And that if not, we would need some sort of statement as to why, so that we knew that we were authorizing something that was consistent with international, federal, and state standards. So I think that's the goal. So
Thanks, Blake. All right, then let's keep moving to section 6 here. Essentially here, the burial requirement was changed so that it's according to industry standards rather than the 1 meter burial as it was before. So that's also in response to industry suggestions. Just pause there, see if that sounds like a good change. Any concerns? All right, see some thumbs up. Wow, that was an exploding thumbs up. I don't even know how you did that.
I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Great. And then similarly, there were a couple of clauses removed just because things are like a little bit more according to industry standards now. So remove the requirement to have the cable be at the shortest possible length, and that bundling requirement was also removed. Also seeing some thumbs up to that. Okay, then let's also keep moving. So number 7, this piece was updated too. So before, there were some comments around when the post-lay burial inspection report needs to be submitted. And so this was updated to kind of just align better with industry practices, that the applicant needs to provide the burial report within 120 days after the completion of the post-lay inspection. I'll just pause there, see if there's any comments or if that sounds like a good change. Right, seeing a thumbs up from Joanne, thank you. From Cameron as well. Okay. All right. Well, if there's no comments, then we'll keep going to section 13. There were quite a few edits here. And I might actually just pass it over to Natalia to explain these a little bit, and then we'll see if there's comments from folks.
So that's regarding inspection, yes?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in response to several comments that we need to identify triggers and etc. We discuss internally and with the other agency how often should we do inspection, and we come up basically that inspection require once the company install land the cable, and then after a major geological event or whatever triggers we added here, because it may also not be just environmental factor, it could be human-made, what we have a lot of situation right now. So we added those triggers and magnitude with the earthquake. We do need to check with the GAMI. That would be like when we drafted the final draft after today meeting. We will also check with the GAMI as well, because they may have some separate requirements for that. Yes, so inspection in the beginning, inspection when we have this any trigger event that listed here, and also inspection and before the company decide to renew for another 25 years, because it's already 20. Let's assume company received easements 20 years past, 25 is close, and company want to renew. We do want to make sure that cable is still buried. So those inspection before the renewal will require as well. So basically one time per 25 years instead that it was 5 years before.
Yeah, perfect.
Any comments are welcome.
Yeah, I see a hand up from Scott. And I'll also point out that previously this the language said that that DSL may request regular inspections throughout the life of the term, and so that's kind of been removed. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a concern about item C upon renewal. I think we're thinking it's great that the state has changed the period of the original permit from 20 to 25 years. I think that aligns very well with industry standards. So that's good. But I can see a place where a cable owner, maybe at 25 years, things are still working. Maybe they want to try to renew it and get a few more years out of it before they replace it. And it just seems like with the cable in place, there's been no problems. We've inspected cables in Oregon 10 times, and never once have we found a cable in Oregon that was buried become unburied. So we removed, as fishermen, it was in our interest to know that the cable was buried, and we've determined as an organization we don't need to do that anymore. It's a waste of resources of all the people that are involved. It's a waste of energy and burning extra carbon. California did away with their inspections, I think primarily because of the carbon cost. So it just seems like if you can get a few more years out of the cable, everything is working and in place. Why would we want to hinder that? That would seem like that would be a no-brainer. Let's just let it renew it and let it go for a few more years. The cable owner may replace, maybe you'll get 30 years out of it. So that's just my comment. I think it makes sense to allow a cable to be renewed, but I don't, or permit to be renewed, but I don't think the inspection adds any value. Just would add expense. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Scott, for the comment, and Joanne for the thumbs up. I'll just pause there to see if there's any other comments or different opinions on that inspection requirement at renewal. Okay. Well, let's keep moving then. Well, I think we can go to section 0851, the renewal application review process.
I had a comment, but I couldn't get.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine.
I looked down for a second and
It's
two hands
okay.
went up.
It's
Go
okay.
ahead.
I just couldn't get my little hand to go up fast enough. I think the language as you have it makes sense. And that's just my personal feeling. I think the inspection makes sense. And I really like that if there's any kind of geotechnical displacement or seismic activity or any of those changes that that is accounted for. And that's just from a planner's view.
Okay, so you're in favor of the language as is. Courtney, go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'm curious where the magnitude of 5 or greater came from. I think we originally proposed 7, but I'm curious why 5.
Natalia, do you have any thoughts on why the magnitude of 5 was picked?
Yeah, we discuss this internally, and this is usually, again, we will consult with Degami, but even so, 7 magnitude, it's quite big. And it doesn't mean that earthquake that less than 7 magnitude will not cause any damages. It could. And we need to be very careful here to put any limitation on nature because we don't know what can happen. So magnitude 7 is very close to 9. And usually this is basically, as we discussed and did some research about that, 5.5, this is the kind of requirements for inspection. We will check again with the GAMI and DOJ if there is any edits need to be here. But we don't want, again, magnitude 7 is quite high. Ocean is not static, it's constantly moving. Tectonic plate moving each year, millimeter by millimeter. We just don't see that. And by putting, we need to be responsible for what we are writing in our rules right now to avoid in the future that, maybe I may not be here, someone else will be here, let's say in, I don't know, 5-10 years. Nobody knows, but let's say state official looking at these rules, and if earthquake happen, it will be, for example, 6 magnitude, and it will cause some destruction and tsunami follow up. And then looking at this rule, the officer, the state official will say, no, we may not require because in these rules we have limitation for earthquake 7 magnitude. So we need to be careful, and that may prevent in the future, maybe save people life. Putting restriction for nature, again, we cannot control that. So that's we find middle ground and looking at what is usually kind of, I would not say standard, but 5 magnitude, we put it here. Again, we will consult with the GAMI. They may propose something else.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thanks. And Joanne? I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to add that 5 seems low and quite common in Oregon. And then the post-event integrity report, it's not really defined in this document. And where would it be? Where would you get it from? Is there a template somewhere? Who's following up that, I mean, we may not even be aware that these events are happening. We may not see anything on the cable. So I see this as maybe something that would be onerous to maintain at such a low magnitude.
Yeah, so the cable owner may not even be aware that an earthquake happened. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah.
Yeah, and then in violation of this, clause, because we're not even aware it's happening. And then, as far as the post-event integrity report, where do we find that? The template of it. Is there a template? That kind of thing. Who's it submitted to? That kind of thing. Is it held against us when we're trying to renew and we may have missed reports along the way?
Mm-hmm. Natalia, any thoughts on that?
As I said, we will discuss that, but sometimes we just take in as for granted 5, 4, 5 happen here. Yes, it's constantly happen, but it doesn't mean that it will not disrupt any services in the future. So putting that higher limitation, we may miss something. Again, this is nature, and so many factors plays a role in this. It could be 5 magnitude, but in several locations, let's say. It could be multiple. And in this case, it may disrupt its services. We just don't know. In this case, it doesn't mean that if earthquake at 5 happen and you require to do inspection, those triggering events, and as my understanding, several of you already mentioned that you monitor cable itself. You know what's happened if it's like some damages and etc. So you do that monitoring just to protect critical infrastructure. So in this case, if earthquake happen and for somehow you see that there is some disruption, you do that inspection and you check that. And that's why we ask to notify us if there is any damages and you found something. Because again, from our perspective, it's important that cables still buried. This is what we want to check as a landowner to make sure that it's safe. But yeah, thanks for your comment. We will talk with the GAMI. We just didn't have time to check specific their requirements for.
Okay, so so Natalia, that's the clarification I'm looking for. Is it the cable owner has recognized some sort of damage and then submits a report to let you know, or is it any time this event happens we have to submit a report?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we will consider some additional clarification needed. Thank you.
All right, a couple of comments more on this, and then we should probably move into other parts of the rules. Scott, and then Scott. Scott Marion first.
Thanks. So I realize it's kind of 11th hour on changing details here, but it's striking me through this conversation that I don't think it's very well specified what is being asked in these inspections. What kind of data needs to be submitted and at what frequency and detail. So as I look at above, item 11 says holder shall notify writing blah, 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 discovery of any change in the location or burial depth. So if what we're asking is any change in burial depth, that to me, that says the data needed is a full examination of essentially each meter of cable in comparison with the original survey. That seems like a lot to me. I am now imagining a scenario where we could predicate all of these requirements on what is the burial depth of the last observation of the cable. So, for example, if at initial burial a cable were buried at a nice deep, meter, close to a meter, something like that, we might say we're not particularly concerned with going to re-inspect that portion of cable, but cable burial is not uniform, and there are many locations where burial depth might be quite shallow. And so I could imagine a desirable situation where we say any portion of cable that has been shown in any survey to be buried at less than, say, half a meter, that's a portion that needs to be examined after a potential incident. And the shallower the burial, the more frequent and more kind of proactive that examination would need to be. Now, I know that's a complicated structure, but we might be able to have some language in here that says something like, if any portion of cable is buried at less than some threshold, and I'd propose something less than half a meter, that would invoke a more frequent inspection requirement, or any inspection requirement, or inspection upon renewal, any of those things, so that, like as Scott McMullen said, we don't waste time and resources on deeply buried cables that are stable. We only focus on the places that there's some data to support that there may be concern in that location, or in the shallows where sediment mobilization is much more likely in the sort of wave affected zone. So if there's potential to install that kind of language, I mean, I'd be willing to help draft something like that, but just a sort of a proposal at this phase.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. I just want to clarify as well. These are rules. We have policy and procedure that can follow up from these rules. And we discussed this because before what emergency response plan should consider, and etc. We cannot put everything there because this is a rule. That's why we have easements, terms and conditions where we can specify details, and whatever documents required here by rules, there will be follow-up guidelines that DSL will develop as internal roadmap, let's say, for the company. What specifically should it be? And again, it will be discussed during the easement terms and conditions based on the case by case and complexity of the project. But these are rules, and we discussed this with DOJ before. It's not just related to this information that we added, but everything else. What should that specific plan consider? Rules should not specify, because it should be flexibility based on case by case situation. And to amend rules, it's a long process, and we are not doing this very often. Guidelines could be amended very easy, or terms and conditions easement terms and conditions upon renewal can be amended as well based on the situation. So again, if we fix everything, we cannot fix everything by rules. It should be kind of open and broad language that allow that flexibility. In other case, we made it up that it somehow company will need that flexibility, but we will return to this rule saying there is no flexibility. So those things will be separate guidelines, and again, it will be discussed during JART and specific project, where the GAMI also will be presented.
And Scott McMullen?
Yes, I took issue with the trigger 5 magnitude for the inspection. It just seems like that is lower than necessary. The OFCC has an inspection requirement in our contracts or agreements with each cable owner, and we don't specify a particular magnitude. We kind of felt like it would be pretty obvious if there were a earthquake of sufficient magnitude that things changed, we would know it. But I can understand in this, you probably want something that's easily define and something easy to implement. And I would suggest magnitude 6. My understanding of the Richter scale is that it's logarithmic and it's uh, quite 6 is quite a bit larger than 5. When I searched last night, I think I found over 160 uh, magnitude 5 plus earthquakes off the Oregon coast in the last 25 years. And in the last 25 years, never once has the OFCC felt there was a concern and a need to inspect a cable, nor have we had any exposures develop that we're aware of. So I think it might just make sense to change that to magnitude 6. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And it sounds like DSL will consult with Dogami on that magnitude as well. But Natalia, anything else?
Yeah, we need to move on, discuss other things. But again, here is Scott, it's not DSL requirements. We try to respond what industry require. And limitation for magnitude, that was one of the comment that industry asked, RAC member asked. So we try to find the middle ground, what we can put as a trigger events. So it's not DSL. We didn't have that magnitude at all. We just used language from part 4 after any significant geological event. We tried to respond to the comment when the RAC member asked to identify triggers and put magnitude there. Thanks. Yeah, and let's move on, discuss other things. Again, we will consult with the GAMI. They may propose maybe, more appropriate language based on their requirements and experience with that.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Okay, well, let's keep moving to the next section. Maybe let's do section 0850 and then take a quick break before we kind of finish up with the rest of the sections. So for the renewal application review process rules, section 1 here was updated to reflect the change that any easement holder may request a renewal. I think previously the rules said, I think previously the rules said, didn't clarify that any applicant has the right to renewal. So this is kind of clarifying that here, but I'll do a quick pause. And then part 8 was also updated to indicate that, oops, sorry. Oh, right. So part 8 here, there was a requirement that if a revised renewal application is not resubmitted within 120 days, then the department may administratively close it rather than denying it. We kind of already talked about this previously, the difference between closing, denying, voiding. So I think I'll kind of keep those comments. The comments that were made previously probably apply here as well, but any other thoughts on kind of this language here in section 8? I don't see any hands. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Thank you. I think it's on, section 1A, the department may amend the terms and conditions. We advocated for may reasonably amend. And I'm curious, again, I'm just new to this. Why not add reasonably? Like, what additional things would you be amending? I think, again, this just goes back to predictability.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Courtney. I mean, I would say I would push back and say what do we mean by reasonable here? It's not our intention to make unreasonable decisions, as a department, and we're constrained, pretty well by statute and rule. So I understand the comment as far as wanting to clarify, but I don't know what putting reasonable in, because I don't think that we can make unreasonable decisions. I don't think we can legally make arbitrary or unreasonable decisions as an agency. But we will take it under consideration, and if DOJ thinks it's a wise inclusion, then we can. As far as what conditions we would see as changing, in the future, we may come to a better understanding about the length of the term. For example, we made the change, from 20 to 25 years to align with industry standards. That's a pretty simple, change. Other complicated changes may be about the bond requirements or other financial assurance requirements that would be specific to the agreement. We may find that the requirements that we initially had are not sufficient, or perhaps are overly burdensome. And so we want to be able to make decisions like that. In addition, as the land manager here, it's our discretion to negotiate the specific terms and conditions of any agreement. In the private sector, if you are looking at using somebody's land, you're subject to a negotiation with them to work out, to quote unquote hash out what reasonable considerations what the parties should agree to.
Okay. Thanks, Blake. Scott McMullen, and Elaine, I also see your comment in the chat on to suggest tying the amendments to updated laws or conditions. So we'll kind of put that in the comments as well. But go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I think I've said it before, but I really think once a cable is installed and in place, it's really to everybody's benefit to extend the life of that as long as possible, and to make it as easy as possible to do that. And again, I bring it up again because in the requirements, it talks here specifically about inspecting the cable, which could cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars to inspect a cable just to try to get a few more years life out of it. So it just seems like I think right now cables are renewed, and I don't know what the process is, but my sense is it doesn't take a lot of new work to come up with a renewal. It seems like it seems like it should be you submit an application form and say the cable has been working fine. It's evidently buried because there's been no problems in 25 years, and let it extend for a few more years. It just seems like it would just be a simple thing to renew. My mind should be. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Scott. All right, well, any other comments on the renewal application review process?
Me again.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I did have a question on section 6. Upon receipt of the renewable application, the department will determine whether it is complete. We had also advocated for a timeline again, just to, again, predictability, understanding that when the application is submitted, that there's some type of timeline to determine completeness of the application. Again, I think we work a lot in the permitting world at the Department of Environmental Quality, and it's really helpful to have those timelines, so that we can understand what could be delayed down the road, et cetera. So again, just asking for a timeline there as well.
All right, thanks, Courtney, and others for your thumbs up. All right. Okay, maybe scroll down a bit more on this section. Can't remember. All right. Just kind of scroll, see if there's any other comments on the renewal application process. Courtney, did you have another comment, or is your hand still up?
Still up, sorry.
Okay, no problem. All right, well, maybe before we move into decommissioning and recovery, let's just take a quick break for maybe 10 minutes, come back at 10:45, and then we'll go through the rest of the rules. So see you all in just 10 minutes here. All right, welcome back. Hopefully most people are back at this point, and we'll keep going through the rules. So we'll pick back up again here with section 0852 on decommissioning and recovery. And one big change was made here. So we had a lot of RAC discussion on decommissioning and removal of bore pipes or HTD pipes. And there were various comments that the bore pipes have value, they can be reused by other cables, and they shouldn't have to be removed or pay a large fee. And there were other comments that, if the bore pipe cannot be reused, then there should be a fee associated with it. So, lots of diverse comments on the bore pipes decommissioning. So the department made a proposed change here to exclude bore pipes from the decommissioning requirement if the bore pipe easement is transferred to another holder for use by another cable. So I'll pause there to see if that proposed change kind of strikes that balance of allowing for bore pipes to continue to have value and be used, but also have a fee if the bore pipe cannot be reused by another cable. Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll just reiterate sort of my feelings on this. It seems like using a bore pipe is in the state's interest. The state clearly sees this as the preferred method. So we want to encourage people to put it in. You can't unremove a directional drill bore pipe. It can't reasonably be done. So um, my feeling is this is one thing we could just exempt the pipe itself from all kinds of fees. Let's just say this is in the state's interest. Let's leave it be. It may be AT&T, for example, at Bandon, put in several bore pipes. I believe there's 4 pipes installed in Bandon. It was years before they used 2 more. They used 2 initially in the 1990s. It wasn't until the 2000s that they used the other 2. And now all 4 of them are not being used. Now, someone may come in at some point in the future, but nobody is paying a fee on that now, and nor should they. It just seems reasonable. This is a benefit to the state, may be able to attract somebody in the future. So I'd like to see the pipe itself exempt from the decommissioning requirement, and not just if it's transferred, but just in case so it can be reused again. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Courtney?
Yeah, I completely agree with Scott. I mean, also, I guess to add on to that from an industry perspective, the likelihood that someone would be, available to, take on the life of the cable system is highly unlikely, right? And so we would suggest potentially adding additional flexibility to this piece. And to Scott's point, if this is in the state's interest, then I think the flexibility should be recognized.
Thanks, Courtney. And
I would
Joy?
like to hear a proposal here. What do you propose as you mean flexibility, Courtney?
Great question. Can I get back to you? Our legal team, I can ask them to draft something for you. Just to consider. Unless, Scott, you have any ideas? Not to put you on the spot.
Well, my proposal was just to explicitly exempt the pipe itself from decommissioning. It would be exempted from the other provision. You take the cable out, and whatnot at the end of life, which can be done. But since the pipe can't be done, just exempt it. Thanks.
Okay. And Joanne, your hand was up. Did you have another comment?
Just to clarify here, and Blake has his hand up as well. If there is no reusable for that HDD conduit or bore pipe, this is what RAC member asked to find that flexibility. We try to accommodate. If not, as language say here, that you need to apply for encroachment easement. So you may not decommissioning it if it's more environmental damaging, but you need to pay encroachment if those hazardous materials that become over time, they're still on state land. So it's basically, it doesn't require decommissioning. If you cannot find someone who can reuse, then you just pay for whatever you left. Again, as a, it's interesting discussion. Without cable, there is no bore pipe at all, yes? And if each company will leave without any payment for compensation on the state land, so what we will have? It's like today we have 1, 2, okay, we mentioned, but then we will have 10, 15, 20, and everything left there without any decommissioning. It's important. And then, let's say, if you find to lease the land, landowner should take care that that land can be in appropriate conditions. If you plan construction there, and you already know that some of those part or portion of the infrastructure you cannot remove in the future because of the different conditions, but that construction was made specifically for that project, and you know that you will leave some portion of that, you should be ready to understand that you need to pay if something cannot be removed. If you lease the land and you finish, let's say, leasing, you need to return that land in appropriate conditions that other user can use it. Because in this case, if everyone will leave without even paying, who should, if something, let's say, earthquake happens, or any erosion in the future that, may expose all those bore pipe, that's responsibility for the state to remove that. That's why we introduce encroachment. It's if there is no decommissioning and you want to leave that part, you can find someone else. If not, that's okay. You pay encroachment. In case if in the future something happened, then the state can use that money to deal with that hazardous materials in the future.
Thanks, Natalia. Let's hear from Joanne. And then I also saw some Kevin and Lene bring thumbs up to some things that were said. And I'd love to just hear from you since we haven't heard from Kevin and Lene, if you don't mind, just kind of bringing your voice into the conversation. But Joanne, go ahead.
Yeah, so mostly, I guess initially it was a thumbs up to what had previously been said by Scott and Lynn on Amazon. First of all, bore pipes, extremely expensive to install for the cable owner. And so they, we're always looking to reuse a bore pipe, to find a bore pipe that already exists. So the idea that there would be all these unused bore pipes up and down the Oregon coast is just not realistic. And also the bore pipe is used because it is better for the environment. If we could direct land cable on the Oregon coast, that is a much less expensive option for the cable owner, but it is more impactful to the environment. So, it would be nice to not have any fee associated with the bore pipe above and beyond the actual installation of it, since you're already paying for an easement for the cable that's in it. But then, and that'll be a comment I bring later, if there is a situation where you do have to leave the infrastructure, then we just need to have a better formula for how much that will cost, because the current formula is cost prohibitive.
All right, thanks, Joanne. Kevin, could I turn to you?
Yeah, my deal is they're gonna probably sell these bore pipes that are existing, so they're gonna be making money off of them. The state might as well be getting some kind of fee for those being in place.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Lene, I'll check with you and then over to Jill.
Okay, thanks. This is Lene Rutledge. I am unmoved by the position of the industry that this may cost you money. But I've made that point before. I really support that there is an obligation by the state to make all of this work and to have it pay. I'm one of the people that was specifically involved in what happened with Facebook, and they had to pay an easement to be able to leave essentially the garbage they put underneath the sea. And I was very supportive that they needed to pay. So you're using the seabed for a bore pipe and you decide that it no longer has any value and you're not using it, I'm sorry, you still have to pay. So I'm very passionate about this. I understand that. But I really support the position that DSL is taking with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Lene. And Jill?
I think it's a good idea if you can transfer them to transfer them just because of the environmental impacts. I mean, it is definitely better if you have them, if you can lease them to somebody else. I shot you some language just to consider in the chat, just for good or bad or whatever. Just think about it.
All right, thank you, Jill. Well, I'd say, still a lot of diverse opinions on this one. I think we've heard the comments at this meeting and past meetings. So DSL will kind of need to consider all of that as we move forward, but I'll see if there's any, additional comments that have not been made already on this part of the rules. Okay, and thanks for that language, Jill, to kind of note that. Yeah, Scott?
Yeah, just to reiterate, I guess the concern that I have is that because of the cost of the encroachment permit at the end of life, if it isn't reused, it would cause, in my view, it would probably have cable owners think twice about coming to Oregon. So I think there should be a real careful consideration in what these requirements are. You could still have a encroachment fee, but make it reasonable so that it isn't prohibiting cable owners from considering coming to Oregon.
Right.
Because I think that's what.
And we will be going to the encroachment fee shortly, Scott, so appreciate that too.
All right, thank you. Bye.
All right. Okay, then let's move on to, I don't think, there were no other major changes there. There were no major changes to the encroachment easement application process, but I'll just kind of give a moment to see if anyone had comments in that section.
I still have a question there, Sylvia. I know that this is probably
Sure.
coming from a place of complete ignorance. I just don't know the process. But I brought this up last time, and then I followed up to you, and I think someone else at DSL with comments. But on both the removal and the encroachment process, now the process that are delineated very clearly, but especially on the permanent encroachment, when nothing gets to what happens if the department denies the application. There are many, many reasons that the agency can deny an application, but it doesn't direct somebody once the application is denied to go back to either removal or another remedy to figure out what happens with the equipment.
Okay.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead, Natalia.
I can briefly respond. Yes, thanks, Greg. We still have it on the list, and I remember about those comments. We just didn't have time. Again, it's continue. We're still editing, and particular that comments to find that connection and clarity. It was not just, the key component that, we wanted to get feedback from the RAC member. So we're still editing that one, and we will see some more clarity and
Thank you.
close chain to that.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. And thanks for bringing that up again, Greg. All right. Then let's keep moving. And let's go to the next section, which is compensation rates, or sorry, I guess application fees. There was no changes made here, but I'll pause. Okay.
Just one comment. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Greg, go ahead.
The move for municipal outflow from 123 into 83 here, these are, I believe, significant increases in those fees. I do believe also the legislature passed a statute that fee increases have to be ratified by the legislature. I don't know if that applies here, but this will be a significant hit for especially small communities on the coast.
Okay. Thanks, Greg.
And just to speak to the fee ratification, yes, these fees will be ratified by the legislature. I believe it's either going to be during the coming long session or the short session after, but it's a complicated process, but we are now very familiar with fee ratification processes.
Okay, so let's move into compensation rates. And there were a few changes made here.
Just quick clarification, with the outfall particular, that outfall will not require JART meeting gathering. So that's a little bit different cost than for other infrastructure. And currently we don't have under Division 123. So we're still working with that. And as Daniela will talk a little bit about outfall, we're still working on that. And maybe we will add separate section that related to outfall specifically after the internal and external discussion to identify application fee for those infrastructure, including outfall that we are transferring from Division 123. So we're still working on that.
Thank you.
All right, so for compensation rates here, a few changes were made, but maybe we can first focus on the change for bore pipes. So at previous meetings, there was concern about the extra diameter charge, like an uplift charge for bore pipes or HDD conduits. And so the formula was changed here so that the diameter distinction is no longer there. And the compensation rate would be $7 times length times the term. And Joanne, I see your hand up, but first maybe Natalia, do you want to kind of quickly go over the slide that shows how this formula would be applied to bore pipes?
Daniela, can you share that one slide with the demonstration calculation? I put this on the folder. Here is, again, based on the feedback, I used the same example as Dario presented during RAC 3, as I remember, bifrost cable. Again, this is just for demonstration purposes, but if using the diameter of the 7-inch before, we had this 2,462,000, etc. Again, in response, we try to find a middle ground, and if we eliminate diameter, we use just flat rate, and the new proposal we just multiply on $7 instead of $3, and then you see the new calculation will be on the current formula for bore pipe 1,450,000 plus.
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. We can leave that up for a second so that people can take a look at it. But you know, the resulting fee ends up being lower because the diameter is not there. But I know that, you know, so just kind of want to see if that seems like a reasonable balance to folks and what your comments are. So Joanne, over to you.
Yeah, so my first comment is, why are we being charged for the portion of the cable that is in the bore pipe?
Why are you being
not charged?
So it looks like, from the formula, it looks like you're charging the easement fee for the length of the cable to include, and then the bore pipe. So, but the cable that's in the bore pipe, shouldn't that be subtracted from the length of the bore pipe?
It is. So this is the length, and Dario is not here when initially he put this parameter, but this is separate. So the cable ended, and then we have additional. So we're considering just bore pipe without cable inside. So it's not that, my understanding, that cable lengths include the bore pipe.
Okay, that's what I just want to clarify, that
Yeah.
we're not
So
getting,
basically,
double charged for the
yeah,
bore.
no, it's double charge.
Okay.
We have this cable, let's say, until that entered to the bore pipe, yes, and
Yes.
we use that length, $3 per lineal foot. Once the bore pipe start, then we're using just $7 for that length of the bore pipe without diameter.
Okay, I just wanted that to be
Yeah.
clear, that we weren't double charged there.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Thank
Okay.
you.
no.
Thanks, Joanne. All right. Any other questions, comments on this? Okay. Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, well, I would just point out that, you know, the obligation for DSL is to provide benefits for the public good, and to manage state lands to the benefit of the Common School Fund. But if the charge is so high that people no longer come to Oregon, then are you really managing for the best benefit of the state? We're talking about infrastructure that have no surface expression in state lands or state waters, be completely underground. So it just seems like sometimes a better strategy is to charge less and make a sale than to charge a lot and not have any sales, if you follow my thinking. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Okay. All right. I think I'm also going to turn it to Danielle to talk about the portion of the compensation rate that applies to outfalls here.
A quick question regarding
sure.
technical term that we use bore pipe or HDD conduits. So I am wondering, from technical language, is it the same? Because sometimes we see that they use simultaneously, or HDD conduit could be for any other cable or pipeline as well from industry perspective. So just to clarify the technical language here.
Yeah, right. So maybe from industry folks, does this feel like it's written according to the language that industry would be using, like for bore pipes or HDD conduits, or is some other language more kind of technically correct?
I can definitely ask Sarah and our legal teams to see if I don't know that offhand, but I will get some details there.
Great. That'd be very helpful. Thanks, Courtney.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about outfalls, as Dario's not here and I just kind of took this on. I will say, because Dario was not here to double check behind me, I had this formula incorrect. So Greg, this might be also where, oh my goodness, sorry, look up here. This might be where the cities have some concern, is that it's the adjacent land value multiplied by 33.3% and then multiplied by the rate set by the state. So it's going to be significantly less, and we will, at our public rule hearings and information sessions, have some examples of how much an outfall based on like current outfalls, like how much it would cost. And so what we did is we took the compensation formula that's used in Division 123 and we put it in here and we made it just specific so that basically what's happening is the intention is not to change the calculation for outfalls and how they're currently calculated under 123, but to articulate that in these rules that the outfalls into the territorial sea are subject to these rates. And we talked about internally yesterday about making a rule just for outfalls, because then Natalia mentioned outfalls aren't going to be subject to JARTs, and so the process for getting an outfall approved is going to be slightly different than having undersea infrastructure. So you will, I want to say there's a 95% possibility that you will see a brand new rule for outfalls for when we go to public comment. And so this is just, again, Dario and I talked this over. He helped me with this, and we took it from 123 to put it to here and just make sure it was clear on how we're calculating things. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to do my best to answer those.
No questions yet. Just really wanted to say thank you for working on that. Yeah. And then we would, obviously, before the public hearing on the rules, we would have the draft to look at, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure. Depending on timing, I'll talk more about this later. We'll try to, I'll talk more about it later on the timing of when we can get rules to y'all.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so likely we'll see more changes for how outfalls are written in here, with the idea being that the way outfalls are treated today under Division 123 would kind of be the same, but incorporated into a different section of rules.
Yeah.
Okay, well, any other comments on the outfall calculation here? Okay, then let's keep going. So we're still in the compensation.
This is the old one, yeah. This, yeah. The sensor, it's old.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think we looked at some of this language before, but I'll just pause, see if there's any comments on this portion of the rules. Okay. All right, let's keep moving to the encroachment easement application fee and compensation. So here, I think no changes were proposed, but I'll turn to RAC members to see if there's additional comments, thoughts. Scott, I know we heard you before on encroachment fees are too high generally, but would love to hear from others as well. Yeah, Joanne.
Yeah, I think I've made it clear in these meetings that I believe that the encroachment fees are very high and would literally sink the business case for landing a cable in Oregon.
And is there something else you would propose here?
A lower fee. a much lower fee.
Could you give an example?
Well, take out the D, that would be a start, like you did with the initial fee for the easement.
Thanks, Joanne. Scott?
Yeah, I trying to be constructive. I had one idea, haven't ran it by anybody else, but how about instead of an encroachment fee, the cable owner, if they thought they would never use it again, turn it over to the state, kind of award title to the bore pipe to the state, which could in turn, um, lease that out or sell it to another party down the road if need be. It was just a thought that came up.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And I guess I'll ask if, given the language that the bore pipe is exempt from decommissioning unless they can find another holder or leaseholder, could that new leaseholder be the state? Does anything in the rules prevent the state from taking that over? That's maybe a question for Natalia or Blake.
I don't hold me to this, but I just off the top of my head, I don't think there would be. But also I don't see the department as trying to get into the business of cable landings and operating cables or doing that. We would love to just stay as a land manager, issuing authorizations and not actually performing those activities. And one of the big things about the encroachment easement is making sure that the installer is the one who is responsible for any risks that arise out of that activity. It's not on the state to be responsible for private industry's activities. So, that is the big motivating factor for the state requiring encroachment easements or some form of authorization after the easement is over. And that is, land manager, state, public land manager wise, across the board, pretty standard practice. Anything that remains on state lands has to be accounted for by written authorization, must indemnify the state. So I don't see us making an exception. We can talk about the compensation fees, but as far as what happens to any material that remains on state lands due to private industry activities, that's solely the responsible of the entity that installed it. And we just need to make that really clear.
Thank you. Cameron?
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. I think it's a fine line. Certainly a cost, to Blake's point. We need to acknowledge, but for a number of years, Oregon has tried to attract cables to land in Oregon. Governor Kate Brown and her predecessors have submitted letters to Pacific Telecommunication Conference inviting, encouraging cables to come to Oregon. And then so now you have this industry, and to Joanne's point before, there's not going to be a lot of vacant ones. If you can reuse it, let's reuse it. And I think any cable owner would do that. But there are situations, and I think I've made this point before in previous conversations, Bandon, where I think, Scott Marion, you might agree, you're not that keen to see more cables come in through Bandon, for example. So there are going to be HDD bores there that are going to be vacant because they can't be reused because of offshore concerns expressed by the state. They are very difficult, as Scott McMullen's identified, to remove. Near impossible, if not impossible, without substantial damage. But the state won't allow a cable owner to trench across a beach, for example, as an alternative. So I think the balance there is, yes, to Blake's point, compensation. You are leaving something on state lands, but are the fees appropriate for that situation because a cable owner is being forced to use HDD, which I think is probably encouraged, because it does protect the cable on the near shore as well. So I think my overall point is think long and hard about the fees if you are, as a state, trying to still attract a cable industry in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And it is a hard balance to strike here, and appreciate, all the comments to try to find that balance.
Can I ask the question? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would like to receive the feedback. Would you agree, instead of one-time payment encroachment that we have here for now, to pay the same as California require, anything that left over on the state land, even bore pipe or portion of cable, HDD conduit, you're not using it, but you're technically responsible for that. So whatever you continue to pay annual rent as California has right now for the rest of the life, let's say. So this is the current rule in California. Whatever you live in on the state land in the territorial sea, you're responsible if you are not using that, but you continue to pay annual rent adjustable to CPI index every year for that portion that live on the state land. So would it be alternative here if you're opposed to have one-time encroachment fee?
So the question is, in California, after a cable has been decommissioned and they leave material, they pay an annual fee, whereas Oregon here is proposing a one-time fee. So is the question, would industry prefer the one-time fee over the annual fee?
Whatever the bore pipe is, leave, they cannot be reused, but you're responsible to continue to pay that portion every year for the bore pipe, for example. The difference between California and you refer like cable will be drive go to Washington. I would give an example. The cable that was landed in 1990 and was renewed several times in Washington state. In 1990 and total for the, let's say from that time, how many years we have, the cable cost approximately $5 million. It's completely different price. So justifying that cable will go to other states, it's not the reason. Because in Washington is not cheaper. And again, we should consider so many factors. California, compared to one-time payment that we propose for as a compensation, the difference that we ask one-time payment and company get easements for 25 years. In California, there is annual rent. If using $5 per lineal foot applied to, for example, this Bifrost demonstration example, let's say, the length of that cable, compensation would be much more higher because annual rent in California will consider $5 per lineal foot, and annual rent, for example, 25 years, every year will be adjustable for CPI index. So that's the question. Yes, Silvia already framed it. Would you agree, instead of paying one-time encroachment here, and you are free of any obligation, to continue to pay every year annual rent for whatever is left on the state land?
Yeah, so curious.
And in this case, we can discuss with DOJ that.
Right. Yeah, so anyone maybe from the industry perspective, kind of, would you have a preference for that annual rent payment versus the one-time fee? Yeah, Joanne?
I mean, I think it could be suggested as an option. It's really hard to, you know, Natalia's just talking off the top of her head here. If we had something to look at and it was you had a couple of options, either pay the one-time fee or pay a yearly fee, and then the cable owner decides what is economically feasible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd agree. We definitely need additional information. I need to run that through legal too. That's something we'd be okay with.
But you also should understand that we don't know for how many years you're responsible. We will need to require more information regarding the ownership, transferring the ownership, and etc.
Yeah, well, that's the flexibility we're looking for. That Courtney has brought up a couple of times already. There could be years between a cable landing being removed and another cable landing, right? So, we have to make those decisions at the moment when we're faced with ending a project and when will the next project come, or who are the potential entities we could, give the board to.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so Natalia, on that, like on the question of the annual fee, is that something that you want to try to continue to consider with industry and have some proposals, or is it sort of more of a theoretical question here?
No, we are open for proposal again in timely manner because we don't have time before, so we need to have a draft, and we also need to consider to agree send this draft to state agency and DOJ. That will require review a couple of weeks before we actually publish on the website. So the time, even for us to incorporate all comments, it's very limited. Yeah, we are open. Please suggest language, whatever would be appropriate, and we will go with this particular question and many other with the DOJ. Because from legal perspective, we need to understand, is it appropriate for the state
Great.
to have it?
Yeah, so if you have any other specific suggestions on the encroachment easement application or the compensation, send those in. I think maybe when we get to next steps, we can talk about timeline for when comments really need to be in order to potentially impact the proposed rules here, but we'll get to that in a moment. Blake, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm wondering if maybe industry can provide a good business case that shows, construction costs, the permitting costs, and management costs, coupled with these costs here would outpace, the revenue and profit that you're expected by use of the cable. So I understand that, costs can be prohibitive, but I'm just curious if we could see some numbers that would show how this, would prohibit industry from landing in Oregon.
Yeah, so maybe back to industry. Is there any way you could show kind of the business case for how the fees impact your decisions? I don't know if that's Blake. I'm not sure if you were actually asking folks to send something in afterwards or speak to it here.
I mean, if we could speak to it here, that would be great. But I would imagine that there would need to be some, work on their end to provide that information. So I wouldn't expect people to provide that here per se. But I think that would help us in our understanding because we, when we built these rules, we, really looked at Washington and California as well as across the nation. And, quite frankly, we felt like we were landing on the lower end, if not the lowest end.
Scott, go ahead. Scott McMullen.
Yeah, I think it's kind of inappropriate to ask competing businesses in a meeting like this to share that kind of information. These are And it just isn't appropriate to have you kind of bear everything out to your competitors in a public meeting. I would say that we should probably focus more on the facts. And the facts are since Amazon was permitted, we've had no new cable projects proposed. And if you look at Washington State, there's a new cable landing station just less than 60 miles north of the Oregon border, where they've already got commitments for at least 4 cables. That's my understanding. And I know that California has new cables that are planned to come in. And Oregon typically has not gone this long without some interest being shown in new cables. So from a practical standpoint, I think the state should understand that cable owners have choices. And maybe the state doesn't want cables in Oregon. I think there's a far bigger impact to the state by not having cables come to the state. There's a huge value, in my view, and I've been around this now for almost 30 years. The Silicon Forest of Beaverton area is driven by the need for high capacity connectivity. And Oregon loses. Maybe the coast isn't as impacted, but Oregon loses if we lose that connectivity. So
Yeah, and Scott, I do want to pause just a second there. I think I'm hearing from Blake that the fees are landing on the low to medium spectrum of fees when compared to other states. And I think I heard from Natalia that in California the fees are higher, and yet it sounds like cables are proposed there. So I'm just trying to understand, where these fees are impacting, and where the real impact is if the fees are coming in at kind of that middle to low range.
I don't believe they are. I think under the proposed fees now, we're going to be higher. We also have to recognize that California, the Los Angeles area, is sort of what I was told early on. I'm no expert in this, but that is really where the center of the West Coast backbone structure is. And so there is a value if you can get into LA, and that maybe warrants a higher fee to get directly into LA. But my understanding from cable owners, there's cable owners on our board that have cables both in Oregon and Washington, and they're saying that these are higher than what they're paying in Oregon. These fees are higher than what they're paying in Washington now, and higher than Alaska. So.
Okay. Okay, thanks for clarifying. Natalia?
Yeah, I just want to respond to Scott's comments. And we discussed that several times, and we hear several times that it's higher, and cable company now landing, you just repeated, in California and Washington cables because it's more expensive. Again, let's don't provide misleading information. We also coordinate with California State Land Commission and see the situation from the inside as well. So saying that cable will go there right now, it's not higher. Right now, Oregon still have just $5,000. So if for now, today, the company decided to land cable in Washington or California today, not in the 2027 or in 5 years, there are probably some other reasons they decided to do so. So I would really ask you, don't, provide the information that mislead the reasons for landing cables in different locations.
Thank you.
May I respond?
Yes, and then we'll go to Joanne.
Natalia, I'm not trying to mislead anybody. These are facts that what I've heard from cable owners, and I don't think it's fair to say that people are going to are not coming to Oregon I think it's fair to say people are not coming to Oregon since Oregon began the change with TSP Part 4. The regulations are much more, or the application process is much more, I think the term the state uses, robust. We've had no interest in Oregon since that has changed. So now we've already put ourselves sort of at a lesser desirable place because of the application process. Now, in raising the fees, it compounds that. So I think you have to look at both the fees and the other. That's why I kept asking for a timeline. There's a justification or a maybe a willingness to look at a state if it's more expensive, but it's faster. And it seems like Oregon doesn't want to be faster, doesn't want to be less expensive. It just wants to be right in the middle of the pack. And it just seems like we should be looking to try to bring cables, not send them away.
Yeah, just to clarify, when I mean misleading, I mean misleading and connecting the factors with the cost, particular landing cable. And you just mentioned LA. Yes, they decided probably to go there and pay even higher fee because there is an infrastructure in place. Because maybe there's some technological company are develop or data center and etc. So when I say misleading, that it's not necessarily the cost leading the decision making where to land cable, because again, for now, we still have $5,000 application fee, that's all. We don't have anything else. Yes, we need to understand that so many other factors play a role in this case. And regarding, that's why we try to propose and amend those rules to find a solution. Fee, we propose encroachment because as a state land manager, owner, we want to make sure that our taxpayer don't pay those amount for infrastructure that left on the seabed because somehow in the past the company did business there and then not exist anymore. And state need to deal with everything to find the solution.
Okay. Joanne, go ahead. And you're on mute, Joanne.
So we only ask the cable company to be responsible for what they left after using the state land. And we try to find the solution. So we are open if you can propose specific language here or alternative. Thank you.
I just wanted to add to what Scott said, that the ambiguity of this process, which has been going on for a couple of years at least, is holding cable companies back from deciding whether or not it's a good idea to land in Oregon. I understand the existing fee, but hasn't changed. But the changes are coming, and we're trying to get an idea of what these changes look like as to whether or not Oregon is a feasible place to land. And then once you land in Oregon, there are other complications, being a more remote state, of getting to our data centers, and so the whole package needs to be considered as far as where do you land right now. And I think that the fact that Oregon hasn't had a new cable landing recently has to do with us kind of waiting. What's going to happen? What are these fees going to look like? What's the timeline? The predictability is extremely important to us.
Okay, thanks for that, Joanne. And Cameron, I saw your hand up. Did you have a comment to make?
Yes, I did. It was just sorry, I don't mean to jump in front of you, Courtney. It was just a general comment of with the fees, Scott's point, there are actually 2 cable landing stations being developed in Washington right now. We've just permitted a cable from Alaska down to Washington to utilize one of those landing stations. There are obviously more interested in either of those. But my point is that to Natalia's comment earlier of the pricing, the last cable to go into Washington was into the Puget Sound through the Salish Sea. So if you're using this model we have on screen, it's quite an extensive, the $5 million, absolutely. But now that there are 2 landing stations on the outer coast, that fee structure is going to be very different. And I understand, and I can appreciate DSL's situation of being in a crystal ball scenario of trying to compare apples to apples with their neighbor to the north. My point, though, is that you are, as a state lands, as a land manager, you are in a competitive landscape with your neighboring states. Usually, you'll see a cable owner diversing on the risk. So you'll continue to see cables going into the California market, but that risk will be offset with cables coming to the Northwest. So while you are comparing to California, you will want to be comparing more closely to align with more of a Washington competitive market if this is the space that you want to continue to compete in. So and as I say, it's a moving target for DSL right now because there is new cable landing stations on the outer coast of Washington. So comparing it to the previous $5 million baseline is somewhat misleading for future opportunities. So thank you, Sylvia.
Can you clarify what you mean by the $5 million baseline?
Yeah. So if for DSL, unfortunately, that you're in a position where you're comparing it. The last cable to go into Washington State was in the late 90s, early 2000s. So we're 26 years or thereabouts. That cable went through the Strait of Juan de Fuca into the Puget Sound region, into Mukilteo area, north of Seattle. So Department of Natural Resources in Washington State use a somewhat convoluted equation, but similar to DSL's proposing right here. It's based on length and likes there. The new cables that will come to Washington will be landing on the outer coast of Washington State. To Scott's point, there are other new cable landing locations. So what that means is that the length will be much shorter than what was previously installed by tens of miles, hundreds of miles almost, because you're not going through that Strait of Juan de Fuca and Salish Sea. So it's a little hard to compare the new market rate of Washington, and they are ultimately DSL's competitor in this space.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, Cameron. Courtney?
I don't have too much to add. I think Cameron, Joanne, and Scott summed it up nicely. I think one thing to note too is that Oregon over the last few months has made a policy change to kind of stop a lot of data center development in that Hillsborough, Silicon Forest area. So I do wonder how that will impact subsea cable landings as well. But again, the cost and the flexibility is going to be, and predictability is going to be really helpful for the industry if the state wants to land subsea cables.
Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate that. Great. And Natalia?
Yeah, I just want to reflect the Cameron said. When I made that comparison, $5 million, it's just an example. Because when Scott mentioned comparison cable that go Washington and to California, we do negotiate with and see what experience California and Washington has, because we were asked by state member meeting and during the Senate bill hearing, they were interested to see what our neighboring states are doing and how much do they charge. So, and when we contact Department of Natural Resources in Washington, this is just an example that they gave us. And that's, I referred to 1990, that it was already that time $5 million compared that Oregon has only $5,000 per application fee. So the same with the California. California is now also considering, and other states considering the current situation with cable, and whatever is in place today, it doesn't mean that it will stay the same tomorrow. So again, it's not a comparison here trying to tell and, saying, oh, here is more charging, here is less cost, and etc. We try to find the solution to be able to compensate for the state land usage. But at the same time, we try to find the solution also for a company to clarify everything in the rules. And the details that you see right now here, Washington and California doesn't have those details. It's much more open-ended, open and broad language. And then they decide internally, and they also have internal guidelines. And with the Washington, yes, it depends on the length of the cable, Cameron. Yes, I agree. And new cables could be the different cost, but it doesn't mean that it would be less than $5 million, because that was so many years ago. And as Washington explained, usually it's case-by-case negotiations for each project. So I'm not responsible for Washington. I just gave an example.
Yeah, okay. And I know that we're getting close to the end of the meeting, so I want to make sure we have time to get through the rest of the rules here. And I appreciate all the comments. I know this section in particular is a complex one, hard to come up with the formula, find the balance, and appreciate all the comments today. And of course, encourage folks to send in additional comments on this or any proposals after today's meeting. And let's maybe move into the last portion of the rules. I think there's just a little bit left, and then we'll see if there's anyone that wants to make a public comment, and we'll talk about next steps. The last parts of the rules here, we have the financial assurance requirement section. So here, industry suggested adding additional ways to demonstrate financial assurances by allowing for a letter of credit. So that's been added here. So I'll just pause to see if that kind of meets what industry was looking for, or if there's any other comments on that part of the rules or anything else in the financial assurances. Okay. And I believe there were no changes made to the last pieces, but I'll just pause to see if there were any additional comments on the appeals section. Yeah, Courtney, go ahead.
I believe there was a change on the appeal decision. It was 20 days, and we had requested 30 days, as that is pretty standard for an appeals process elsewhere. From an administrative perspective, I think 20 days is a really short timeline, and we would much prefer 30 if possible.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Courtney. Yeah, we're still working on that. We will consult with that timeline with DOJ, so that's why we don't put it yet. Yeah, if it will be okay, yeah, we will put it.
Thanks.
All right. Well, any other comments on anything in the rules that you feel like you haven't been able to say, RAC members? Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I have it on page 24 under number 2C, little 3. And the term of this is encroachment easement term will be 100 years. And I just had a question if it's meant to be a permanent easement. I think that was the understanding based on all the discussion we've had so far, is that this would be a one-time fee based on 100 years calculation. Why not make it very clear and explicit and say that it is a permanent? I'm not happy with the encroachment fee itself, but it just seems like this is a little confusing to have what is implied to be a permanent fee for permanent abandonment, and yet it says 100 years, and will that lead to confusion down the road? So it just seemed like maybe that could be cleaned up.
Okay,
and
thanks, Scott.
acknowledged that it's a one-time.
Yeah, and Scott, I'm just gonna ask quickly if the part that under two meets your interest at the very top of the page there. The holder of the permanent encroachment easement must pay a one-time encroachment easement for permanently leaving
Well, that,
infrastructure.
yeah, that is very clear. It's just that in part three, it sort of contradicts it in a sense.
Okay, so maybe clean up the language to make it
Mhm.
super clear. Okay, that's helpful. All right. Anything else and other parts of the rules? Yeah, Courtney.
Me again. They're on the renewable application review process, section 4. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact page. But we wanted to request changing will to may in regards to a new application fee that may be required instead of will be required. I think this preserves the department's ability to require a new application fee for late renewals where circumstances warrant, while also giving the department the discretion to waive or reduce the fee where the delay was minor or the holder has a strong compliance record, etc.
Okay. I think I'm sorry, my voice is going. I think I'm in the rule you're referring to, Courtney. Do you know which section or subsection?
I'm sorry, it is okay, section 4 looks like
Or
number 4.
number 4. That was the process. No, I think it's under the process rule, right?
Well,
Yes, the review
number 4.
process. Mhm.
Okay. Right here?
Yes. New application fee will be required, and we were hoping for may be required.
Okay. And then I'm going to ask you what the rationale was behind that because it went out of my brain already.
No problem. Mine too, actually. So this is just in regards to the new application fee. So it preserves the department's ability to require a new application fee for late renewals where it's warranted, while giving the department discretion to waive or reduce the fee where the delay was just a minor delay or the holder has a strong compliance record and things like that. We would feel more comfortable with may instead of will.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank
We'll
you.
note that down and take
And I know
that.
I'm not capturing that exactly, but it'll be more in the summary as well. And we do have a transcript of all of this.
I'm happy to add it to the chat too, if that's helpful.
Okay. Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you.
You got it.
All right. And actually, if as folks are thinking if they have any additional comments here, I'm just going to check to see if there were any members of the public that wanted to make a public comment today. And if you do, please raise your hand. All right, I don't see anything. So I do want to move to next steps so that you all can kind of get a deadline for submitting any written comments and you can understand the public process coming up. But kind of any final thoughts from RAC members before we move into next steps? All right. Okay, then Danielle, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So this is going to look familiar to last month's next steps or what's coming up. We will again be having a public comment period July 1st through July 31st. And any comments that you may have, like, Courtney, you talked about your legal department needing to look at things and draft things. This is a perfect time to submit those written comments. We will have 4 public rule hearings. Right now I have 1 confirmed for Seaside. Astoria, I couldn't find anything in Astoria that was reasonably priced. So we're going to be at the library in Seaside. And then I have the Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport confirmed. And these are going to be The Newport is going to be July 22nd. Seaside will be July 23rd. And I'm working on trying to get something in Coos Bay or the surrounding area for July 21st. Those three will all be in the evenings, and then we'll have an afternoon, I believe we'll have an afternoon virtual public hearing on the 24th. And we will be getting back to y'all when we put out the public notice for the general public about this. We do send a message straight to the RAC with all of this information in it. And then once we get all the public comments and we evaluate those, we will be taking this to the State Land Board in October 2026 with an effective date of January 1st, 2027. And barring we don't have any hiccups, we're going to be going in October, mainly because legislation passed this past short session that requires the Department of State Lands and like 3 other agencies to rules can't become effective less than 28 days after we file them with the Secretary of State. So we are required by Senate Bill 793 to have these effective January 1st, 2027. And then we have another legislation that says we have to have it 28 days, and the State Land Board in December would be less than 28 days before January 1st. So, and the State Land Board, because these are land management rules, the State Land Board has to approve these rules. We're going to have, as Natalia has been saying, further review by state agency technical advisors, which may lead to additional edits, as well as DOJ review. We cannot guarantee that we will be able to get you this draft rule language before it goes out to the general public. Because my deadline with filing with the Secretary of State is at the end of June, and I've given Natalia as much time as I can so that she can get these edits in before we go to public comment. But I will do what I can to get you these rules as soon as we are able. And it may not be until it goes out until July 1st. There's just a lot of factors. Courtney.
Is that normal, Danielle?
Yes.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
It'd be helpful to know like what we're commenting on.
Yeah, and it totally understandable. Yeah, and so it's just because we're on a tight time period and we needed this meeting and we delayed our meetings. We had wanted to start in January, but we delayed a little bit. So we're pushing up against the timeline, and I lost some of my wiggle room to be able to get it out to y'all before. So it's just tight timelines based on a lot of legislative directives. And then, as always, in the next week, we'll send out a meeting summary and post this meeting to our website. One thing that will also come at a later date, not too late, is we'll have an overall summary of all of the RAC meetings, and that will be provided as well. And everything is posted to the DSL rulemaking website. We send out notice via our you can subscribe to notices for rulemaking, but again, we send out these notices to the RAC to make sure that y'all get the information and spread it to whomever y'all represent, and to share it. Any questions about what's coming up next? I know it's a lot of information.
And I'll ask too if there's a specific date where written comments should be provided right now from the RAC, kind of before the public comment process. Maybe Natalia has the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't want to answer for Natalia, but yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, considering the deadline I was put on. So as soon as possible, but I would say Wednesday, the final one, because with my deadline, I need to finish the draft by the end of next week, and then I need to send our state agency to give them at least 1 week, And also Department of Justice, we need to give at least 1.5 couple of weeks to look at that from legal perspective, because Department of Justice reviewed the draft only in the beginning, and we made significant changes. We need to give time to compare with other statute and rules, particular outfalls, and how we should deal with Division 123. So I would say Wednesday, it's June 10. And then I will have a couple of days and probably weekend to incorporate them before I send into state agency and DOJ.
Okay. Yeah, so Wednesday, June 10th for any additional written comments or suggestions from RAC members.
Yes, and I would highly appreciate if you provide specific language and not just saying, oh, should be considered differently, because we have very limited time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your participation over the last 5 meetings, and all your discussion, and really, getting into some complex, difficult conversations, but public comment and industry engagement, community engagement always helps rules be better when they're drafted together like this than if they were done in isolation. So really appreciate the conversation, even though it was difficult at times. With that, any final thoughts? Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, Sylvia, I just want to thank you. You did a great job herding all us cats, and just want to compliment you for the great job you've done. I was pretty impressed. Thanks.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. It's easier when there's a lot of passionate voices in the room that, eloquently say what you want to see happen. So thanks to staff, and thanks to staff too, also in the chat for all the work you've put in, and RAC members. All right. Well, have a good Friday and rest of your weekends. Take care. Bye.